At Christmas, my parents refused to give gifts to my children. I asked, why? And Dad said, celebrate Christmas without us, we'd rather celebrate with our real grandkids than with you and these. I culturally told them to shut their mouths, and we left. Karma was inevitable in the new year. I wasn't always the outsider in my own family. I always thought we were close. Not perfect, but close. Growing up, my sister Jessica and I fought like any siblings do, but there was still this feeling that we were in it together. That changed slowly, and then all at once. Jessica married into money, started a business that took off, and somehow managed to become our parents' favorite without even trying. Or maybe she tried. I wouldn't know. I was too busy raising 2 kids and trying to stay afloat while working a regular job and helping Megan build her photography business from the ground up. My parents started treating Jessica like she was some kind of royalty. Everything she touched turned to gold. Every decision she made was brilliant. Her kids were geniuses. Meanwhile, my kids Lily and Max became invisible to her. The weirdest part? My parents weren't subtle about it. The last Christmas we were invited over, Megan and I went all out. We bought presents for everyone, baked cookies, and even brought an extra set of stockings in case my parents forgot to hang any for our kids like they had the year before. Jessica's twins unwrapped brand new iPads, designer sneakers, and tickets to a VIP Harry Potter tour. Lily opened a plastic makeup kit that still had a sale tag on it. Max got a jigsaw puzzle with cartoon frogs on it. He was 9. I didn't say anything right away. I didn't want to ruin the day. I waited until everyone sat down to eat and pulled my dad aside. I asked him why the presents were so unbalanced. Not in an aggressive way, just genuinely wondering what the logic was. He looked at me and said, celebrate Christmas without us. We'd rather celebrate with our real grandchildren than with you and these. He didn't even finish the sentence. He just waved his hand like he was done. I told him to shut up. Not yelled. Not dramatic. Just the kind of firmness that makes silence stretch. Megan and I packed the kids' things while Jessica sat there watching, but not saying a word. Michael looked like he wanted to disappear into his scotch glass. On the drive home, Max asked if he'd done anything wrong. That hit harder than anything. We didn't go back the next year. Or the year after that. Every Christmas since, it's been just the 4 of us. Small. Simple. Real. What none of us expected was that 5 years later, Jessica would call me out of the blue. Not to say hello. Not to catch up. She asked if we wanted to spend Christmas together. At our parents' house. I laughed at first. I thought she was joking. But she was serious. She said the boys missed their cousins. She said Mom and Dad were planning to do something nice this year and that maybe it was time. I asked her straight out, why now? She paused and then said, because things aren't what they seem. I didn't know what she meant, but I agreed. Against every instinct I had, I agreed. I didn't realize then that she was trying to fix something. Or maybe just preparing us all for what was to come. When Jessica called that November, I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't in the mood for the favor she was about to ask. She hadn't called in over a year, and our last conversation had ended with her telling me to stop acting like a victim. After our parents iced my kids again. But then she texted. Just 3 words, can we talk? I sat on it for 2 days before I finally called her back. She answered the first ring and jumped right in, as if we'd been in the middle of a conversation. She asked if we had any plans for Christmas, and said that our parents wanted to do something special this year. I told her I hadn't spent Christmas with them in 5 years for a reason. She didn't argue. She just said quietly, I know. That's why I'm asking now. Things are different. I didn't buy it. I wanted to say no. Megan told me I should. But then Jessica added, the boys miss Lily and Max. And I think they need it more than you know. That took me by surprise. It wasn't something Jessica usually said, anything that suggested vulnerability. So we agreed. Megan was cautious but supportive. The kids were surprisingly enthusiastic. They remembered how things had been, but they also remembered the year we left. They were older now, and we made a deal with them, no expectations. We'd go, spend the evening, and leave if anything felt wrong. We bought thoughtful gifts. Books that Max had been into lately, a new hoodie that Lily pointed at every time we went to the store. Megan even baked these crazy gingerbread cookies shaped like dinosaurs because Max once said Santa would like something cooler than the regular stuff. Christmas Eve came, and as soon as we pulled into my parents' driveway, I felt that old knot in my chest tighten. The house hadn't changed. Still the white colonial with the same wreath and broken plastic reindeer out front. The kind of place that looks cheerful from the outside, but you know better. Jessica greeted us at the door like someone trying too hard. She hugged me longer than usual and looked like she wanted to say something but didn't. Her boys ran over to Lily and Max. For a few minutes, everything was almost normal. Inside, the house was decorated to the ceiling. Lights everywhere. My mom was showing off like she was getting ready for a magazine shoot. She gave Megan a half hug and said something about how she hadn't aged, which sounded more like a dig than a compliment. Dad didn't say much. Just nodded and poured himself a whiskey. Dinner was fine. Tense but fine. My parents made comments here and there about everyone finally being under the same roof again. And Jessica kept deflecting with fake laughs and changing the subject. But then we got to the presents. Jessica's boys opened theirs first. Brand new laptops. I actually chuckled, I couldn't help it. Not because I was mad, just because it was so predictable. Then Lily took the one with her name on it from our parents. It was a calendar. From last year. Still shrink-wrapped. Max's gift? Another puzzle. A picture of a goat on a rock. He just stared at it. Didn't even open the box. I asked Dad if he was serious. He shrugged. You said you would bring gifts. We thought that meant you had it covered. I looked at Jessica. Her mouth was slightly open as if she couldn't believe it either. We handed out our gifts. Real ones. Personalized. I even gave something to my parents' expensive wine that Megan picked up so she wouldn't be accused of holding a grudge. Jessica followed us into the guest room later, after the kids were asleep. She didn't knock, just walked in and sat on the edge of the bed as if she didn't know where else to go. I didn't ask. I just waited. Finally, she said, I'm getting a divorce. She looked down at her hands. Michael moved out 3 months ago. We told the boys he was working in another town, but they're not stupid. Then she looked at me and added something I never expected. I always thought you were jealous. Of me. But really? You're the one who got it right. She told us things I never thought she'd say. How she was tired of keeping up appearances. How Mom and Dad only saw what they wanted to see, and everything else was filtered out. How even when her marriage was falling apart, they were more worried about whether she'd embarrass the family. The twins weren't sleeping well. They were anxious. The younger one, Ryan, was starting to wet the bed again. Jessica said she felt like she was watching everything fall apart while pretending nothing was wrong. And now, with Christmas under the same roof again, she was trying to fix something maybe not for herself, but for the kids. That night, I realized something I hadn't before. She wasn't calling me because she thought it would make things better. She called me because, for once, she needed a family. And that was the first unexpected thing that year. There were more to come. I thought the night before had been the height of awkwardness. Jessica's confession. The recycled gifts. The tension so thick it felt like we were all in a pressure cooker. But Christmas morning made it all feel like a warm-up act. We woke up to screams. Not just raised voices full-on screaming. I opened the bedroom door and heard my dad yelling something about betrayal and manipulation. Then my mom's voice, shrill and panicked, asking if they were really going to do this. Right now, in front of everyone. Megan looked at me. We didn't move. We just listened. Next came Jessica's voice, louder than I'd ever heard it before. She said things I never thought she'd say to them. You care more about your image than your own grandchildren. You've humiliated David and his children for years, and I let you. But not anymore. And then the kicker. I have already filed. Michael and I are over. And guess what? He cheated. For 2 years. Silence. Then my dad said, You're lying. You wouldn't destroy your family like that. Not unless someone told you to. That's when I heard my name. My father accused me of poisoning Jessica. He said I had always wanted to bring the family down, and now I had finally gotten my revenge. I walked out of the room. Megan tried to stop me, but I wasn't going to stand in the hallway while my name was being thrown around like that. I walked into the living room and everyone froze like someone pulled the power cord on a sitcom. Jessica was standing there in her bathrobe, red-eyed, but not crying. My mother was sitting on the couch, shaking. My dad was pacing like he'd just been served with court papers. I asked if anyone else was blaming me for Jessica's problems. My mom snapped. She said it wasn't about blame, it was about family loyalty. And then she did something I'll never forget. She pointed to my children, who were in the kitchen eating cereal and watching cartoons, and said, "These children have never been a part of this family in the same way." The room went dead. Even Jessica looked like she couldn't believe what she had just heard. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just walked into the kitchen and told Lily and Max to get their coats. Megan was already behind me with the bags. We were halfway to the car when Jessica ran out, barefoot in the snow. "Please don't go." I turned and asked her one thing. "Why now? Why now, after all these years?" She said, "Because you were always right." I just didn't want to believe it. And then, right there in the driveway, in front of my kids, she said something else. She rewrote her will. A year ago. Everything goes to my kids. Nothing to yours. I didn't even flinch. I just said, "Sounds about right." And we left. Christmas morning. No presents opened. No goodbyes. But the year wasn't over. And karma, apparently, works fast. We arrived home that evening. Quiet drive. Max fell asleep before we got on the freeway. Lily had her headphones on the whole way and didn't say much. Megan just kept looking out the window, like she was trying to forget everything at once. I spent the next day packing up the Christmas decorations. I didn't feel like leaving them out in January. Megan was in the kitchen trying to salvage the ham we never got to eat. The mood in the house was this strange mixture of relief and disbelief. Then, 3 days later, the first phone call came. It was my mother. She didn't start with hello. She said, "Can you come over?" I asked why. She said, "Your father collapsed." I drove over alone. Megan wanted to come, but I told her to stay with the kids. I didn't want her around the mess that was waiting for me over there. When I got to her house, the front door was open. Jessica's car was in the driveway. Inside, my dad was lying on the couch, pale, sweating, and refusing to go to the hospital. Jessica was pacing the dining room. Apparently he'd collapsed while taking out the garbage. He hit the side of the garage and went down. I stood there for a minute, just watching him. This man who once told me to celebrate Christmas without him, who looked through my children as if they were strangers. Now he was begging me with his eyes not to say "I told you so." I didn't. I just asked if anyone had called for an ambulance. Jessica shook her head. Said he refused. So I called one. Simple as that. The paramedics showed up within 15 minutes. My dad was still trying to pretend he didn't need help, but they took him anyway. High blood pressure. Something was wrong with his heart. At the hospital, while we waited for the test results, Jessica and I sat in silence. Then she said, "I think Mom is afraid he's going to die and she's going to have to face what she did alone." I said, "You mean what they both did?" Jessica didn't argue. And then came the next unexpected thing. She reached into her purse and handed me a manila envelope. I opened it. Inside were copies of the revised will. The one she had mentioned on Christmas morning. I skimmed it. Everything: house, savings, investments divided among her boys. Not even a mention of my kids. Jessica said I didn't know about it until last week. I just found it by accident. You never told me. I asked why she showed it to me. Because I told them either they fixed it or I would. I raised my eyebrows. Fix it how? She said, "I'll get my own lawyer." You can't treat your family like dirt, and then expect me to play along. It was the first time she'd ever drawn a line in the sand like that. I wasn't sure if I believed her yet. But I listened. Then, 2 days later, karma dropped another surprise. My mother called again. This time she asked if we could meet. Not at the house. She said she didn't want Jessica there. I agreed. We met at a diner. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She ordered tea and just stared at it. She said, "I don't expect forgiveness. But I think I've made the biggest mistake of my life." And that's when I realized they weren't just spiraling. They were about to unravel. My mom didn't come right out and say it, but I could tell what she really meant in that diner. The hospital bills were piling up. My dad's insurance didn't cover everything. There were complications with some medications, and the tests they ran turned up more problems than they expected. I sat and listened as she danced around the issue. I didn't interrupt. I just watched her unravel bit by bit until she finally said it. "We're in a little trouble." It was strange to see the woman who had once dismissed my children's birthdays as an afterthought now staring at me with the expression of someone looking for a lifeline. She said Jessica couldn't help right now. That got my attention. I asked, "What do you mean she can't help?" Mom hesitated, then said, "Jessica hasn't told you everything. Things aren't going well for her." At home I thought about it for a long time. Megan saw the look on my face and didn't even ask what was wrong. She just said, "Whatever you decide, do it for you. Not for her." That stayed with me. A week later I transferred the money, covered the balance from the hospital, and sent enough to get them through the next few months. Not because I owed them. Not because they deserved it. But because that's what I wanted my children to see. That we don't repay cruelty with indifference. That doing the right thing isn't about who's watching. My dad didn't thank me. He didn't call. But a few days later I got a message from Jessica. She asked me to meet her at a coffee shop near her office. I went. She looked tired. Not the usual business owner stress kind of tired. A different kind. She told me that her business was hemorrhaging money. That one of her partners had suddenly pulled out. That Michael hadn't paid a dime in child support since he moved out, and she was drowning in debt. She smiled and said, "I don't think I ever envied you before. But now I do." I didn't know what to say. She said, "You've always had a life that I couldn't buy. And now I'm here asking you how you did it." I didn't gloat. I didn't rub it in. I just said we stopped trying to impress people. She nodded slowly, as if the answer hurt more than it should. Back at the hospital, my dad was recovering better than expected. The doctor said it was because he was starting to take things seriously. Eating better. Less stress. Jessica came to visit once. She didn't stay long. But I came back a couple of times. Dropped off books. Sat with him. Talked about normal stuff, sports, weather, whatever. One day, as I was leaving, he said something under his breath. "You're a better man than I gave you credit for." He didn't say it looking at me. He said it as he adjusted his blanket. But I heard it. And somehow it felt louder than all the Christmases he'd ignored us put together. Things were shifting. The man who once told me to celebrate Christmas without him was now relying on me to keep the lights on. And my sister, who had once been the example I was supposed to live up to, couldn't even pay her mortgage. Funny how fast the ground moves when the truth is finally revealed. By mid-January, the air felt different. Not dramatically, just less tense. The kind of calm you get after a storm, when no one's quite sure whether to celebrate or just keep their heads down. Jessica had been showing up more. Sometimes she texted Megan, asking for help with something small, designing a flyer, organizing photos for a client, stuff like that. Once she dropped off a bag of groceries without saying anything, just leaving it on the porch with a sticky note, "For the best cookies in town." We never talked about the will again. Or the Christmas that exploded. Or the calendar and the goat puzzle. It was as if the whole family had quietly agreed to shove the wreckage in the back of a closet and pretend we were redecorating. Then, toward the end of January, Jessica texted again. "Just dinner. No occasion. I'll cook." I didn't respond right away. Neither did Megan. We waited a day, maybe two. Finally, we said yes. It was a light snow that Saturday. No dramatic scene pulling into the driveway this time. The reindeer decorations were gone. Maybe finally thrown out, or maybe buried in the garage. Either way, the house just looked like a house. Jessica answered the door in sweatpants and a hoodie. No makeup, hair in a bun, apron dusted with flour. It was the most normal I'd seen her in years. Inside, the kids were already playing a board game, a loud, ridiculous thing where each round ends in fake arguments and high fives. Megan joined Jessica in the kitchen. I stood awkwardly with my dad in the living room until he said, "You drinking tea now?" I nodded. He disappeared for a minute, then came back and handed me a cup. Mint. No sugar. Just the way I liked it when I was 15. I didn't say anything, but I noticed. Dinner was roast chicken, potatoes, and some kind of green bean thing that Jessica kept apologizing for. It was delicious. We all sat down. No tablecloth. No centerpieces. No fancy anything. We talked. Lily talked about a science project she was excited about. Max bragged about beating a 5th grader at chess. Jessica's boys were quieter than usual, but they smiled more. My mother asked Megan for the cookie recipe. That was unexpected. So was Megan's, handing it over without a second's hesitation. After dinner, Jessica brought out a store-bought cake that was crooked because she dropped it in the car. We laughed. Then my dad said something that stopped the whole room. I sold the boat. Everyone looked at him. He'd had the thing for almost a decade. Barely used it, but always talked about fixing it up and sailing it somewhere. When the time was right, he said. I figured maybe the time is already past. Better to put the money into something that's actually going to move forward. Nobody reacted right away. We didn't have to. Later, as we were putting on our coats and the kids were collecting leftover cake and napkins, Jessica pulled me aside. She said, "You've been right about a lot of things. I just didn't want to admit that you could be right and I could be." She didn't finish the sentence. Then she hugged me. When we got in the car, Max asked if we were going to do this every January. Lily said, "Or maybe next summer. Barbecue instead of roast." I looked at Megan. She was smiling. Not the polite kind. The real kind. And just like that, we were a family again. Not the one we had been pretending to be all these years. The one that actually sat down, shared cake, and didn't need a holiday to be in the same room. Mini update. February brought something we didn't plan for. It's funny how once the ice breaks, things start moving in directions you never expect. I thought January's dinner would be it for a while, a rare moment of peace. But 2 weeks into February, I got a text from Jessica that just said, "Can I drop the boys off at your house tonight?" I replied, "Are you okay?" She didn't reply for almost an hour. Then finally, "Emergency. I'll explain later." "Please." We said yes, of course. Lily and Max were thrilled. They turned it into an impromptu sleepover, pulled out sleeping bags, set up snacks, the works. Jessica showed up looking rattled, but trying to act casual. She hugged the boys goodbye and said she'd be back tomorrow. The next morning she called. It turned out that Michael had been arrested. For fraud. Something to do with his old business partner and a bunch of bad checks. Jessica had known things were shady, but not this shady. She'd spend half the night trying to get a lawyer and figure out how this would affect the boys. The twist? My dad had already heard about it through a friend at his golf club. Instead of blaming Jessica or getting defensive as usual, he went to her that morning and said, "Just tell me what you need." When she told me, her voice broke. She said, "I didn't expect him to show up like this." And that was the unexpected part. Not Michael's mess. Not the legal drama. But my father. Stepping in. Quietly. Without ego. Feels like everyone's rewriting themselves this year.